I'm Mark Gagan and you're listening to the Voice of Insurance podcast, produced in association with Advantage Go. Pick and choose your own best-of-breed insurtech and data providers with Advantage Go's ecosystem. Today's podcast is all about innovation, and today's guest has been responsible for doing more of it than most. James Slaughter is Chief Underwriting Officer at Apollo Group, a Lloyd's business that has been behind collaborations and new product launches galore in recent times. Be it exploring semi-automatic underwriting and the application of artificial intelligence, the development of its own ibott syndicate, helping launch a parametric syndicate, or other specialist startups focusing on risks as diverse as cyber, drones, employee parental benefits, or unlocking new business from Africa, Apollo has become one of the go-to market enablers for innovation in the London market in recent times. James is always incredibly direct as an interviewee, and what you see is what you get. I find he's exactly the same person whether the microphones are switched on or off. And that's why this episode is such a treat. James always says what he thinks, and it's clear he thinks a lot more than most. Listen on, and you'll learn a lot about what's coming down the track, how some of the vanguard technologies are being best exploited, and which are the newest developments at the insurance cutting edge James is most excited about. It's breathless stuff. I had a lot of fun recording this one, and I think you'll enjoy a listen. Enjoy the podcast. James, welcome back to the Voice of Insurance.
Thank you very much. Great to be back.
Oh, excellent. It's really good to be chatting with you. We're really going to be focusing on innovation, and it's something I think Apollo's become known for innovation. Every day I'm looking up new press releases of new ventures and interesting things that you're incubating. So Apollo's in many ways a traditional Lloyd's business, but also has done a huge amount of innovating and is now incubating quite lots of other things and backing other things in many different ways through all sorts of different distribution channels. How should we think of you these days? Should we think of you as much as an incubator, as an underwriter in your own right?
It's a great question. It's one we probably wrestle with ourselves. I think incubator's probably a touch too far, a stretch too far perhaps, but we do absolutely have a culture here of innovation through the business. And yes, 1969 feels like a traditional business, but actually inherent within 1969, we do quite a lot of product innovation. We have partnerships like Moonrock on the drone side of the business. They're innovative in their own right, even though it's more of a traditional business. But I think what we've learned, and ibott's probably our most well-known manifestation of innovation, is it actually takes time. You can't innovate in an instant. And so ibott is now into its 8th year, and it doesn't have a smooth road all the time. It takes time, and you have to invest in the business, and you also have to learn from your mistakes. I think the industry sometimes have a habit, it's learning from mistakes, is to stop doing something. But actually you need to keep going. And so ibott's a great example of, as you learn and develop, you improve your capabilities, whether that's pricing, product, partnering with your clients. And then I think what comes from that then is confidence that we can take on opportunities like Norman Max, like Africa Specialty Risks, where we can help those businesses and bring our innovation capabilities to help support them in what are actually quite innovative products and distribution opportunities.
So it's definitely wrong to say you're an incubator. You're not going to get a whole load of college grads who don't know anything. Before someone comes to talk to you, they need to really be reasonably mature as an insurance business before they come.
Yeah, I think the trade-off is that at Lloyd's, there is a minimum viable product for all of the effort to bring a new business to Lloyd's. I would say that Lloyd's has never been as open as it is today for credible opportunities. You heard in last week's market meeting for us, that was the increase in ICX to 5%.
Yeah, that's the innovation category, isn't it?
That's the innovation category, which we've been using. And in fact, we have something we call the ICX Consortia, where we partner with other businesses in Lloyd's and leverage our joint capacity through a single channel, which we find our clients value much more greatly. Because if you innovate in isolation, putting a $2 million line or a $5 million line out actually doesn't help a client. But if you can put $20 or $25 million out on a novel product, you can actually start to solve some real problems. So innovating at scale is one of the opportunities.
Yeah, a product's not a product if it doesn't solve the client's problem.
No, and lots of people are innovating, but if you don't come together and innovate at scale, it's difficult to get it across.
So it's one of those core benefits of the London market is this is a place where that can be done.
Yeah, and I think Lloyd's in John and Patrick recognized that. And when they introduced ICX, absolutely the ambition there was that there's an advantage for a subscription model to work. I don't think anyone had necessarily the time or the inclination to really lean into it. We decided that the only way to make a benefit out of it and to take an opportunity as presented was to invest in it. So we have a dedicated underwriting team run by Hayley Budd, who I've known for many years and is a fantastic innovator in and of her own right. But she's also now running a P&L on behalf of us and our consortia partners. We recently launched a product called Just Parent, which is a first in the UK. It's around equity in paternity and maternity leave. And we built that from the ground with the client. The client's well known to Lloyd's. Ed Gaze used to obviously work in the Lloyd's lab. But that was true ground up innovation. And we've brought that product to market through the ICX consortia. So fantastic opportunity. But if you don't have the dedicated resources to really focus in on and give them objectives.
That's for a small business that can be affected adversely. If it's a very small business, you want to give all the same benefits that a big business gives, but then you don't really have the diversity. If you've only got 10 employees and suddenly 2 of them are on paternity/maternity leave, then you've got a big problem.
This is where that product kicks in. Absolutely. That product there is to create equity across both maternity and paternity, because small companies quite often compete in that space for talent. And if they do have a small resource pool, losing someone to Malpac can have a significant negative impact. So it's a great product. Super proud of the team because they genuinely took something, deconstructed it and reconstructed it as something that we could viably sell as a commercial product.
On this ICX, so the innovation category at Lloyd's, it was allowed to be 2% of your stamp. Now it's going to increase to 5%, so 2.5 times increase. Is that demand-led? Were you pushing for more?
Well, I was asked politely by some innovators in the market to publicly call for the increase at the Lloyd's Lab 5th birthday, which was, I think, the only time I've ever seen a DJ rocking the ground floor of Lloyd's whilst swinging a beer. So it was a great party, but I used that opportunity to make a public call for it. And it's demand-led for sure. And I think it's reflected in the concept around TCX as well, the transition version of that, which you need to do it at scale. Otherwise, you can't bring viable product and solution.
And that's the energy transition.
Yeah, that's the energy transition. So again, at Apollo, we've actually got a vertical that we're working through, trying to think through that, because it covers so many of our product lines, from the third party to the first party, from innovation to traditional. And it allows you to think. So we'd actually been thinking about it. And when that was announced, we had a quiet nudge saying, oh, good, we were there first again.
Is it there's just slightly less oversight, or just the acknowledgement that you can't have a 20-year loss record on this because, well, there isn't one because no one's done it before?
Sorry to interrupt in mid-flow, but this is just a reminder that you could be advertising right here, right now, and getting your message directly into the ear of key decision makers in the insurance industry. And you'll be doing it while they're absolutely in listening mode. The podcast is the medium of the future, and so is audio advertising. Contact me on mark@thevoiceofinsurance.com, and I'll do everything I can to get you started.
It's more the latter, actually. I think no oversight would not necessarily be a good thing.
Obviously, there must be oversight.
I will go on the record as saying I find value in the oversight. But I think it's more to do with the fact that if we stick to more traditional methods of evaluating risk, we do limit our ability to innovate. And so with the proliferation of data and third-party data sources and our ability to ingest and look at things in different ways, which is exploding and one of the super exciting elements of what's going on in our industry today.
So I suppose you can have a synthetic loss record and say, well, look, all this data suggests from the last 25 years of, paternity rates or whatever, maternity rates, etc., at small businesses and blah, blah, blah. You can come with a very plausible data set, even though no one's ever insured it before.
Yeah, so that's exactly how you do that. You've got to use your underwriting experience and merge that with high-end computer analytics. AI, dare I say it, I have to drop AI in, I guess. But in reality, all we're talking here is big data analysis that says something along the lines of what could it have been? And have we tested the environment in which those conditions are applied? And from that, can we create, as you say, a synthetic environment?
Are you excited about the opportunities within that new transition class?
Like I say, we've been talking about here. And because we've got a dedicated team, whilst they're out trying to build product, it actually takes a long time to incubate product and take it through the life cycle of bringing it to market and putting a stamp down. And so not all of their products make it. So as a result, we're always looking at stuff. And so in our words, we probably don't use the word transition quite the same way. We think about carbon more broadly, and carbon includes energy. It includes, therefore, the transition to low carbon energy. But there's a heck of a lot of stuff going on in carbon around the asset carbon. in terms of thinking about projects that are there to restore forests and things that may have financing or credit risk related elements. So we think about it more broadly, perhaps. But
I've had some Keita on an earlier podcast. Are you excited about that? Some people talking about that as potentially being the next cyber. I mean, it's easy to get carried away, but do you think if we're going to hit net zero by 2050, it looks like it probably could be quite a big one?
So I'd certainly say it's about the most exciting, novel area to explore today, right now. As an industry, I think what I will call the more traditional fossil fuel-led businesses of manufacturing, transport, and the global supply chain kind of are exhausting the limits of where insurance can be super helpful as a product. We see through ibott the fact that we've got emerging business models, and we're leaning into those sort of embedded insurance models. That's what we do. They require different insurance solutions. So there's lots of room for us to expand and for the market to grow there. So you need to find those new frontiers. And I'm no expert for sure on the space, but we're having a lot of fun exploring and learning as a business. And because we've got this dedicated innovation capability, they can curate that internally for us, which gives us a bit of focus and put some structure to it. Is it as big as cyber? Is it bigger than cyber? I think it's credible to say it is akin to cyber in terms of the opportunity in front of us.
What other things are you most excited about? When you've got pipeline, obviously some things don't always make it. For example, you've just had the Norman Max launch parametrics. Are you as excited about parametrics and the possibilities of their application in insurance as others?
Yes, because as ever, in a partnership model like ours, where we've partnered with Brad and his team to bring that to Lloyd's, we're very excited. We would say as a business at Apollo, we need to be as excited about the underwriting risk of that business as the entrepreneurs bringing it to us. That's one of our sort of themes around our partnership. And then we feel fully vested in how we can help them bring to market. So parametrics are widely talked about as a credible solution for narrowing the protection gap. I think that's a very credible thematic thing to sort of hang your hat on. I think the proof is going to be in the pudding. The challenge here is, where do you get the credible triggers and metrics to enable you to put parametrics more broadly? So yes, of course, we can see them around the Florida coastline as being very effective, and New Paradigm and Norman Max are successful in doing that in the US today. But can we do the same for Japanese wind? Can we do the same for New Zealand earthquake? How do we get comfortable building those triggers and metrics so that we can deliver it? Because if you look at that Norman Max product, it's really essentially filling a gap where the traditional market has gone higher excess, probably very specific on my coverage of what's in buildings, contents, and a little bit of business interruption. With a parametric, you can be much broader in your coverage. You can offer a little bit more value, and you can help close that protection gap. So we very strongly support the concept, which is very much an S concept in ESG lens of the product. And what we want to help Norman Max and Brad and his team deliver is that capability more broadly. And so we can help both through our syndicate management capability, but we would like to think we can help through our data science and our analytics and our underwriting capability as well.
I suppose, and if please don't shoot me down, I suppose it's my job sometimes to be devil's advocate. I sometimes think that parametric is sort of a solution looking for a problem sometimes. And if you ask the client what they wanted, they'd say they just want better indemnity insurance. Because, why have a parameter that says, I'll insure you if your house gets over 700 degrees centigrade? And say, well, what I really want to know is my house burnt or not?
Okay.
And that's the parameter. Is it burnt or not? That's the parameter rather than
fair challenge.
Degree centigrade.
Yeah. So fair challenge. I think well-designed parametric products are answering a risk challenge that UNL products are not able to deliver because of the nature and the way in which we deliver UNL products, the pricing, and our understanding of the risk. Through a parametric, you can essentially eradicate the need for these deductibles. You can broaden your coverage and say, look, you've suffered a financial loss that is measurable. We can, through a parametric product, indemnify you for a broader set of products. Now, is it, yes, if you could get a UNL, but the problem is you can't get UNL in those layers. And equally, there are plenty of territories and perils for which there's almost no UNL protection, or it is just not sufficiently covered for us to be able to offer protection where it's probably most needed. So
it's always going to be a complementary thing, you'd say?
I think it's a super complementary product. I also think it is a product that can really help nation states to build more robust risk management in an era of very volatile climatic events.
And I suppose a virtuous thing about that parametric insurance, of course, you have to do the science to make sure that the parameter correlates with the reality and therefore you're reducing the basis risk. So actually, you're helping investing in the science of understanding that risk, which hasn't been done before much in some of those territories.
Absolutely.
So it's got to be beneficial for those territories to have their risk studied better.
Yeah, completely agree. I think that's the challenge that we've taken on with Norman Max is, can we do that? And how can we do that? And I think our partnership is a good example of, we've got some of that analytics and science capability in-house. We don't have all of it. They have some great ideas and they have super energy. They're a great team. And they've got some track record in Florida, and we're working to unlock that more broadly. And that's where we get really excited by it. And through the Apollo model, over time, we actually are able to invest as well as manage. And that mix between what we do as both syndicate manager, but also syndicate investor, because we're a third-party business, but we invest our own capital into those businesses, that strength of partnership really starts to flourish.
Another partnership was announced about a year ago with Artificial Labs on algorithmic following capacity. And I remember you saying at the time, this was, I think it's quoted from probably a press release that said, there was not enough fast, reliable and responsive capacity in the follow market.
Still not.
How's it going? How's your report card on that so far?
So there's still not enough fast, reliable follow capacity in the market, which is great because we will be bringing something to market, I'm sure, in the coming months. We've had fantastic pilot over the last year. Artificial are a great partner, and it's a partnership principally because it's not just a piece of software, right? So a lot of people think of these things end up being a software agreement, and what we desperately try to avoid is some sort of just simple software license.
Like some new coffee machine you've plugged in the corner and then you just press a button.
Absolutely not. So one of the great things, and I think one of the super important advantages of the way we've structured our partnership with Artificial, is that when we're building a product, the Artificial team are with us building a product. And so we are now down to about 4 weeks start to finish to build a product from start to finish, which in my experience is kind of unheard of. So in our world, a product could be GA, it could be airlines, it could be Hull, it could be mortgages interest. Those are products in our vernacular. And we're able to turn one of those around from start to finish, which is with nothing on a piece of paper, to a product in market in under 4 weeks. Because our partnership with Artificial allows us to essentially co-create that together, and therefore it's not a piece of static software. You would never be able to do that in a traditional end user arrangement. So that partnership's fantastic. We're really excited. We've got a couple of deals that we're in the middle of finalizing, and we'll be putting ink to slip, as it were, in the coming days, that have taken our hypothesis right at the start around fast follow capacity and actually extended it. And what we're starting to see is that the tools and service that we've brought to the table, which are different to other examples of that in the market, are starting to unlock avenues of insurance risk that aren't currently open in London. And we find that to be perhaps the most compelling logic for continuing to grow and expand our offering in that space.
So that's the kind of business that, if it's volume business, that kind of thing, that it's not going to get brokered in the same way. Or you might, if someone's sitting in San Francisco and can press a button and get a line off you, that could be quite handy. Yeah,
so I want to dismiss the press a button and get a line off us. It's not quite that simple. We are very clear that we believe, whilst there are spectrums of how far you can go down the algorithmic automated world, we're actually much more closely aligned to the traditional model of having human interface. We call this augmented as opposed to fully algorithmic. It's not subtle, but there's quite a bit of difference in how we think about that. And the value we place on the human interaction is quite high. Principally, it's an intermediated business, and the person at the end of the policy is a human. And so we find that piece, and certainly in our pilot, we've underscored the importance of the human element to it. So when someone presses a button, they will get a very clear indication that they might, rather than press a button and it magically appears. So there's still a little bit of work we do with human intervention, but we find that to be extremely powerful and helping to build trust in machines that are doing quite complex things, and that the human is on top of that, is able to understand what's going on, is able to direct, control the output. And so it's not closed black box technology. This is very open and transparent.
The one thing about an AI is not a salesperson. It's not going to say, what else have you got? In the way that an underwriter can. That when they're on the phone to a broker, say, by the way, have you got anything else you could send me? Or did you know we're interested in this now? Or have you heard about the new line we're doing?
So yes, I actually maybe take that one step further. AI can't do the claim in the way that a human can do the claim. So when we think about it from the lead perspective, the importance that a client places on our ability as an underwriter and an insurer to put an arm around our client in face of a challenging claim and to say, don't panic. We've seen these before. We are going to help you. We're here as your business partner to help you get through this challenging period. That arm round, that support, that being there to help a client in a difficult situation like a claim event could be, that's human. An AI can't put an arm around a client and say, let me help you here. This is what I'm here to do. I do this all the time. So actually, in the human element of it, it's just as important to think about the claim experience there as well.
I suppose an AI is never going to authorize an ex gratia payment either. It's going to be outside its rule book, isn't it?
Yes, although I would say, just pick up on that thread a little bit. We talk as an industry a lot about AI on the underwriting side. I actually, quite frankly, think the biggest upside is in the claims element of the business.
So not the human fronting of that claim, but behind the scenes, presumably, all that analysis of if something might be litigated, for example, that understanding of what you should be offering, what have these settled at before, what should we be reserving, all that stuff, right?
So there's such a wealth of information that frankly isn't codified. I like to think of myself as an above average human, right? But we all do. So if I was to read an engineering report or a loss adjuster's report, by page 2, I'm drowning in information and I've got 130 pages to go. As a human, I'm sort of reaching my natural capability
usually
limits.
We just flip to the end and say, well, what do they recommend?
Yeah, read the last page, right? Yeah. So actually, that wealth of information that gets to the conclusion is going to be super valuable if you have 1,000 of those reports that you could go through, because as a credible source of actionable intelligence, we're not actually able to do that today. So for me, the data and the knowledge gap that AI can help most in is going to be in the claims environment. Answering from that data set questions like, what's the probability that this one ends up in court? Pretty useful for thinking about your claims strategies.
And what will be the outcome if you do go to court?
And then, starting to, instead of mock jury, we've got a mock AI that can talk to the likelihood of outcomes in a settlement scenario.
But always have that, but the human fronting it, because obviously doing the emotional side of it.
The human emotional side. We're a respected market leader here in London on US casualty. And as much as our underwriters, I like to tell them that being a leader is great and they're very important, is actually our claims adjusters who our clients value the most, because it's our claims adjusters who put the arm around them and help them. And our ambition, of course, as an insurer is to get to an equitable solution for all parties to a claim. And that's sometimes quite difficult to get that balance. And it really requires the human empathy and capability to do that. And a machine would fundamentally not be able to achieve that in my mind.
This is all nascent technology and it's building up. And obviously it's going to become much bigger. How much of the London market do you think, for example, might be automatic or semi-automatic follow capacity, say in 10 years' time? And what would be an ideal optimal?
So we debated this a lot as we've gone through our pilot on what we call smart follow in partnership with Artificial. So we've built a business case around the idea that about 50% of capacity is in traditional lead sense of capacity. And leadership, we don't consider leadership top of the stamp or GUA. We think of leadership across about 5 or 6 dimensions. And you may be the person with the biggest line and therefore at the top of the slip with signing the GUA, but you may not be able to do that for various reasons. We don't have the biggest lines in the market by any stretch, but we lead quite a lot of business. And that might be because of our claim service. That might be because our product innovation, whatever that might be. So if you think about leadership around a number of dimensions, then there are going to be people who aren't necessarily at the top of the slip who would still be leading in terms of setting terms and helping the client develop the product, or indeed helping the client resolve claim situations. So probably about 50-50 split. But the second 50, the follow 50, we see that as a very wide spectrum of alternatives from our view, which is the human-led augmented underwriting. So you're talking there more about scale, triage, enrichment and things like that, as opposed to final decision-making, all the way through to line slips and automatic. So it's bound on the line slip, you're on, and the machine is just confirming lines. I think there is a wide spectrum. What we've seen in the market today is actually a wide spectrum of different approaches to that. So in that 50, how much of that goes to the full automatic versus how much is more like our model around a human-led process? Don't know. But that's a big pie for the follow market to divide up.
Quick abbreviation, Buster. I'm old, and so I remember the company market one was called CLUA. So it's the underwriting agreement by which following market agrees that the leader will bind them in claims in certain circumstances, etc.
And underwriting endorsements.
And it stands for general underwriting agreement or something like that. Good. I'll put that in the notes, but I always like to bust a jargon when I can because they always evolve. You see, it used to be called something else, and I can't remember. I remember CLUA, but that was a really long time ago.
Yeah, it's essentially simplified. Many, many years ago, it's simplified. It's a long time since I
remember writing about it. Yes, some things are leader only these days, aren't they?
Yes.
Good. Small things, mostly. You've always want that human in the loop. Are there any circumstances under which you think there might not be a human in the loop? Say something got really commoditized.
I think it's difficult to see that where we operate, which is if you think of Lloyd's as the specialty market of choice, then by definition, it feels like it's not naturally suited to a commoditized product.
I suppose by the time it's become that commoditized, I'm sure, writing the first motor policy in Lloyd's in 1887, whenever it was a really big deal because it was untried technology. Everyone thought it was going to explode and they would sort of look, just stick with horses, they're much safer. But it was a really exciting new tech, cutting edge thing to do at the time. And then, of course, it became the most commoditized class of business that exists. So I suppose at some point, there's not much motor at Lloyd's anymore, is there?
And what motor comes to Lloyd's typically is specialized and or difficult and large. So I think at Lloyd's, that feels unlikely. I think in an industry, we know in personal lines, you can go on and ask a opera singer or a Russian meerkat to quote you a few policies pretty quickly and it's 5 to 10 data points and you're away. Of course, that makes sense. And the rating tools are designed around that. It's very easy to do. I'm somewhat skeptical that you could achieve that in risks of the level of complexity we talk. And if you get excited about what it can do for you, what it's going to be able to do is to take on new opportunities, new markets and innovative products even quicker, which is actually what Lloyd's is about, right? Which is tackling some of those risk coverage gaps. And can we address carbon? Can we address digital asset-based types of exposure? Can we close some of those gaps in the market?
And on existing classes, in terms of using technology to improve your skill as an underwriter, I mean, how much of an improvement in skill do you think we're likely to get? And obviously, eventually, the market is competitive and therefore your kind of skill advantage will get competed away in reduced price, one presumes. And also there's that productivity angle as well, i.e. that a great underwriter could be twice as productive or 5 times as productive. On both of those, what sort of metrics are you looking forward to as a senior executive saying, right, I want my team to be 10% more skillful and 100% more productive, which would be great for my bottom line?
Yeah, so I think everyone starts with the productivity, right? That's the common
So it's easier to measure, isn't it?
It's very easy to measure, premium per head or slip count per head or whatever your metrics might be. I think it's less trivial to achieve. In our realm, we can prototype and demo it today to our board, and we can show the seconds that it takes to go from one end to the other of that process, which is extraordinary acceleration of productivity. Commercializing that or productionizing that, as our tech friends would say, is somewhat more challenging. But I think that's where people focus, and rightly so, because it feels more tangible, easier to get. I actually think the bigger uplift, and by uplift I mean return, is going to come because we understand more about what we've done, how we've done it, when we did it, where we did it, et cetera, et cetera. And that is the power that machine learning and the similar tools will bring to data sets that currently don't exist, that we will be curating over the next 3 to 5 years as we learn more about what we do.
So there's nothing specific that you're sort of saying, right, I think everyone should be twice as productive by 2028 or something.
Of course I do, but I'm not going to give you that.
Well, good. I'm glad they've got something to work to. But I suppose it's the thing that you said before was sometimes if you don't label it and if you don't have someone in charge of innovation, then innovation, funnily, doesn't always happen, does it? And again, I presume if you have a specific productivity target, you have something to aim for.
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't measure it, you never make progress. And even if you refine that over time, you're moving forward all the time. And I think it's really important that we treat these tools correctly and apply them properly. And there will be risk around how you do that in the industry. And there will be many stakeholders will be very interested in ensuring that we're doing that in a appropriate fashion. But we are going to learn how to use them. And we should not be scared of thinking that we're going to learn some good stuff and we're going to learn some, that wasn't probably the best way to deploy that. And we are going to learn and develop. And if we keep that in mind, I think we will accelerate the development and deployment of these tools. If we stick to thinking about them in the dimensions of what we think about today as more traditional underwriters, we'll probably put a collar around what they can achieve and restrict the ability to evolve. And that's why your analogy with our innovation thought process about being a little bit more transparent and specific about what you're trying to achieve allows you to then go and get it.
I'm not a very corporate person. I went on a corporate away day, but I did learn one really good thing. They said, look, if you want something to happen, you have to actually specifically get up and actually put it somewhere and say you're going to do it. And then if you want to meet new people in your own business and get to know, well, then put something in the diary. Say 10 minutes a day where I'm actually going to talk to someone new. Like, wow, who knew? But actually it's true. You never do it otherwise. What about brokers? We always talk about underwriting because I suppose in this sphere, in the technology, it's the sort of sexy side of things. But what about the brokers? How should they be best responding to all of this? I mean, historically, we're always thinking the brokers are way ahead of us and they're running rings around us and we're the fragmented underwriting market and the more concentrated broking market is having its way with us. How should they be best applying some of this artificial intelligence? I think it's going to be that they're going to reverse engineer everything you do.
So that's actually a great challenge that has come from the top of our board. That's one of their great challenges. And as well, aren't you just giving them the keys to your kingdom because they'll just be able to re-engineer? Actually, we've tried to see if we could do it, and we don't appear to be able to reverse engineer our own thinking. So I think that's unlikely. I also don't think that's in the interest of the broker, to be honest. If you're going to try and game the machine by reverse engineering it, you're actually not focused on your client. And I believe one of the great positive opportunities from the deployment of these tools and technologies is actually we'll go on a joint endeavor with our brokers to serve our clients better. That's what the industry's there for.
It's just about freeing them up to actually go and get more business.
If we're going to be more productive, they're going to have to be more productive because we're going to ask them to go get more business. So I think there's the element of jointly, we create more headroom for creative problem solving. We create the opportunity to solve risk gaps that currently we all know exist. We just don't have time or the resource or the recognized individual to lead it in the business. So for me, I actually, and maybe I'm a wonderful optimist too often, but I do think that the deployment of these tools will act jointly for both the broker and the underwriter. I'll come back to the human element. From our proposition, the broker's the most important person we're serving in that follow space.
There's going to be less uncertainty about the price, isn't there? Because I suppose that old reverse engineering would be when you had a really specialist wholesale broker and you're a retail broker, you send them the business and they could pretty much give you a very rough indication of the price. They'd tell you under what conditions it would be, what sort of deductibles it's going to have, what sort of limits of the rate, and they'd give you a pretty good idea of what the price was because they knew they were incredibly specialists. I suppose that was that accumulated knowledge. These days, you'll know the price straight away because I suppose the answer will come back so much quicker. Yeah. Anyway, so that value in reverse engineering perhaps won't be as important. I suppose the importance will be the specialist knowledge of what product you need and how you need to go about it and how to apply that product and make sure you're buying the right product and the right limits rather than the price, because the price, I suppose, will be something that the broker will have on a screen and be able to show you.
So I think sometimes we maybe overestimate the value of speed. My mum used to say less haste, more speed and all that. I think transparency of information is perhaps more valuable, and you can be just as valuable saying no but and saying under the but, here are the three things that if we knew more about, or you could provide this bit of information, because we're not closing doors. And that's why I believe that's a human approach rather than a machine says no. If you had it on a screen and you entered it and it just came back red, you're not making progress. We're not helping the market expand. So if you come back with no, but I've got a blank here and I've looked at this and it's told me this, and what about that? Doors ajar, broker can engage with the client and actually be more useful, because it might be a reasonable challenge, and it might be that actually we've thought about it. And a good example, in our live market testing of our Smart Follow, we have a data enrichment process that uncovers some interesting attributes of some of the risks. And on one of those risks, we uncovered something that changed the premiums. And when we presented it back, we said, did you know this number over here we think is fundamentally different based on the analysis that we've done? And the broker said, oh no, I hadn't done that. So it went back, and actually the premium was lower, and should have been lower because the rating was off the wrong benchmark. And so that whole process was not about giving a quick price, although we gave quick information back. It was about discovery of that information in a quick and transparent way, and then helping that to create the right product for the client. So in fact, the client ended up paying less for the same product, but it was now reflecting the right risk parameters in that.
One of the great things about a market is going into Lloyd's and getting different prices, different opinions about the same risk, and be able to present those varying opinions back to a client as well, and say there are different options here. As we get more and more technologized, shall we say, do you think those are going to converge? There's going to be less variance between different prices? Or will you always have the confidence that, of course, you're going to have your view of data, you'll have a different lake of data, and you'll be analysing it a different way, and somebody across the street or in a different box in the same building will be doing something slightly different, they'll still come up with variance? I suppose the big question is, will we all converge and all end up doing exactly the same thing?
So I think there's a really good analogy to that, which is cat modelling. Cat modelling, launched in 94, became, by 2005, was a sort of core technique for everyone. By 25, everyone went, oh, crikey, that wasn't quite what I was expecting. Recalibrate. I think if you look at the cycle of cat pricing, what you see is the amplitude of variation across a cycle is now lower, i.e. the wild swings are less amplified, but they still vary. And if you go from one market to another, despite there being a pretty commonly accepted standard, the prices can vary by significantly enough for there to be a lot of choice in the market. And what it's done is it's pushed the price into a corridor that's more predictable, but isn't uniform. And that's because if you take a cat model and just run it, you get the portfolio number that is the standard model, but we all change it. We have the Apollo view of risk. We twiddle a dial here, we change a dial there, we switch something off over there.
And of course, you have different portfolios constructed in different ways, and you arrive with a risk in a particular territory, and you might be completely overloaded in that territory and don't really want it. And someone else is short, and it will be a good diversifier for them. So
you've got,
they can charge less.
You've got two dimensions. You've got the portfolio dimension, that is, and then you've got the risk dimension, which is what are my experience-based views of that underlying risk. And when you bring those two together, you do not eradicate price variation in a market. What you do is probably narrow the band, the range around what that could be. So it's just more predictable. If you have a 1 in 100 prop cat layer, the industry's approximately 10 online, someone might quote you 9, but they're not going to quote you 4, right? And they're not going to quote you 14. But someone might quote you 9, someone might quote you 11.5. And next year, after a normal market experience, it kind of stays the same. So, and I think that's a great analogy for how particularly lead underwriters could use these tools, but not create a market in which there's only one answer. And I'm a fundamental believer in the power of markets and the power of this data, but I don't believe you end up in a place where you've got no choice and no competition.
But as a broker also, it's never a very good look for the client to say, when you had to swear blind that it was worth 10 last year and now it's worth 4, they're saying, well, hang on a minute, I don't think my risk has changed very much, but it's obviously your market doesn't know what it's doing.
Yeah, so you get transparency, you get consistency, and then you get out of that more confidence and trust in the whole process. And I actually think that builds stronger long-term relationships. And if you take away some of the capital flows that impact supply and demand in the cat market, as we know, I actually think the cat market's been pretty stable, plus or minus. The cat market's been pretty stable, pretty predictable from a reinsurance buyer or seller's perspective. We will all have our gripes, and one day we'll have the opposite view because it will be in our favor slightly, but they're not miles apart. We're not in a world where we just don't understand, as you say, going from 10 this year to 4 next year. What are you on about? Why did I pay 10 last year? What are you doing? Right? That's gone. And we've therefore got better relationships, I think, more enduring partnerships. And as a business, I can plan a little bit better.
James, We've had a really, really good chat. I know you've got to run off to go and innovate a bit more, which is a shame. It just means that there'll be more to talk about next time. So thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed it. Make sure you book another date to come back on The Voice of Insurance sometime in the future.
Mark, it's been a pleasure, as always. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, don't forget to subscribe or leave a like or a review or recommendation on whatever podcast platform you used to access this program. These really help get the word out.
Before we go,
Just a quick reminder that advertising slots are available here and in other places in the Voice of Insurance podcasts. Podcasting is the fastest growing medium and attracts a high quality audience of key decision makers. It's also an intimate medium where you, the listener, are right in the room with me and the interview subjects. Needless to say, that means it's a great way of getting your message out directly to an audience because you know you've got their full attention. It's also very cost effective. So get in touch with Mark at thevoiceofinsurance.com to find out how you could be speaking directly to the industry.
The Voice of Insurance podcast is produced in association with Advantage Go, enabling enterprise-scale underwriting through a single pane of glass.
Voice of Insurance is produced by me, Mark Gagan. Music was written by Anna Gagan and produced by Carlos Gagan. Check out more podcasts and written comment pieces at www.thevoiceofinsurance.com.